Welcome, everyone, to Talking Back to Suicide. This is your host, Dr. Diane Kaufman. I like to be called Diana for my creative self. I'm a poet, artist, humanism and medicine awardee, and a retired child psychiatrist who is the founder director of the Hold On campaign for suicide prevention that uses the power of art to educate, connect, express, and heal. And our special guest today on the podcast is the multi-talented Jude Tretter Wolf, who is an expert on the applications of creativity to personal and professional development. Jude is a licensed clinical social worker, certified practitioner of applied improvisation, and creative arts therapist with 40 years of experience as an innovative and improvisational clinician and trainer. Jude, having worked in every area of mental health, is also a writer, performer, storyteller. She's an esteemed Moth Slam winner, a trained improviser, and host of the Improv in Real Life podcast, exploring the intersection of creativity and improv skills in dealing with real life goals and stressors. She's also the host of Mostly True Things, a game wrapped in storytelling show produced by LifeStage. Jude has designed and facilitated training workshops and classes about creativity in healing, learning, and professional development for the National Association of Social Workers New York State annual conferences, UC Berkeley Continuing Education Program for Behavioral Sciences, SUNY Buffalo Institute for Addiction Studies, the Psychotherapy Networker Symposium in Washington, D.C., and NYU Arts in Healthcare, among many other conferences and organizations around the country. Jude was the chair of the 2019 Applied Improvisation Network World Conference in partnership with the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University. Her publications include articles in the International Journal of Arts and Psychotherapy. Wow, what a background. And Jude, we are delighted to welcome you to Talking Back to Suicide.
Well, I'm delighted to be here with you and talk about this very important topic. So thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Jude, perhaps we can begin with tell us about how you entered into the mental health field. And was that the beginning of your journey into the creative arts and improvisation, or did the arts come first, or were they happening the same time?
Well, that is a wonderful question.
Yeah.
I was a musician all my life. I started piano when I was 6 and was a church organist when I was 12, which wasn't great for my mental health, but I did it. For my musicianship, it was probably great, but it wasn't great for my mental health to have a high pressure job at that age. So it took me a while as an adult to find my way to a professional lane that I wanted to be in. And that turned out to be music therapy, because music, I always wanted to study music, but all that pressure when I was young made me sort of afraid to study music as a performer. But when I found that there was such a field as music therapy, where we would use music to help people who were suffering, help people express themselves, lift them up, connect, all the ways that music helps us tell our story, that inspired me. So I was a musician in search of a lane, and mental health provided this wonderful confluence of worlds. And so I started music therapy school when I was 22. And there was one other 22-year-old in this very rigid program. It was very timed. Everything was sequential in this program. So everybody else was 4 years younger than us. And this other, we called ourselves the fossils, because we felt 4 years. That 4 years between 18 and 22, a lot of life happens. And for me, it was a search for myself and to break out of some oppressive ways of thinking, and for him it was cancer. But we were best friends, and we found our way to, and we landed in this program at the same time, and supported each other through the rigors of a very important training program. But we were just older than everybody else. So I always think about I felt like a late bloomer until I got into the actual field, when I then felt very naive and young. So there's a constant learning curve. But the arts were always a part of my experience of being a human being, because I'm a musician. I was also an actress growing up. And then finding this way in which the arts are a channel for our true self, but also for just exploring what it means to be a person, and wherever we are, that was something that getting a degree in music therapy and then training more and more as an actor, and much later as an improviser, but critically very important as an improviser, because music training is very rigid. It's, it really turns you into a perfectionist, and this is why being a church organist at a young age had such an impact on me, because with music, everyone can hear every mistake you make. There's no question about it. There's no fudging with a piece of religious music or a Bach piece, or, when it's keyboards, everyone can hear every mistake. And then as in music training, everyone can hear every mistake. That's not really great for your thinking about being a person, when we become so self-conscious about every mistake we make. And so I was always afraid of improvisation, because it really baffled me that it was far from perfect. It was something that you couldn't really predict or prepare. And when I discovered that improv is a way to actually free up all that energy that gets bound up in perfectionism, which I think is a big struggle that a lot of people have when it comes to depression and anxiety and being enough and feeling like enough in this world. I got turned on to improvisation, not in music, it translated into music, but that's my background, that where these two worlds collided or came together for me at a young age. And then I continued to train as a musician and as a therapist, and kept discovering ways that not just music, but anything creative is something that everybody has something they can tap into within themselves that is a creative outlet. That being said, people don't have to use the arts in order to tap into that part of themselves. But as a creative arts therapist, what I learned how to do is to help somebody using these techniques to tap into that part of themselves, because that is the part of us that is capable of change, the creative self. So that's a long answer to your question.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking about perfectionism. Could you say something about shame in terms of perfectionism?
Sure. Perfectionism is often, in most cases, is driven by shame. It can be from not having enough, let's just say developmentally. Let's go back developmentally and then move from there. If we're raised in a world where we just don't have enough support or enough guidance for how to get it right, for how to belong in the world, get things right, we're going to feel we're going to feel inadequate, and we're going to figure it out on our own. So often, like children of alcoholic families, children where they're just not getting enough guidance for how to get things, how to do things so that they feel like they belong. And that could be just like socially, like even just social skills, right? It's very easy for us to feel a sense of embarrassment, and that can lead to a cycle of shame, where that becomes sort of a set point of, as soon as we feel that feeling of not being enough, we overcompensate to try to do it better than enough. And lots of forces contribute to that. Even, with the fact that we're in classrooms with other students, and being enough, or just knowing how to belong and how to get along, can sometimes get away from some people. And shame is very much socially induced emotion, but then it becomes an internal dialogue almost, where we're shaming ourselves out of a way to try to do better, and then it becomes a way of putting ourselves down. And so when I say that thing about every mistake, when you're a musician, everybody hears every mistake, and and it becomes embarrassing to make those mistakes. So then we overcompensate by being better than enough, and that then becomes a cycle of I'm only enough if it's perfect. And of course, it's an illusion. It's never going to be perfect. And that's never going to heal the shame. The shame is a socially induced emotion and a defense against being an average person, or being average, or making mistakes and being okay with that. Having flaws and embracing them. It becomes a defense against what we really need in order to heal and be all right, to be able to try new things and create our own path in life. We have to be able to try new things, experiment, and sometimes it just won't work, and we have to be okay with that. So the shame cycle is an unfortunate one. I mean, abuse induces a sense of shame, trauma, but it can be something like, I worked with kids who changed schools. If they change schools mid-year, or they even change schools between years, starting over in a new place with a new group of people is very tough. And that can, just feeling like an outsider, can induce a sense of shame. We need a lot of support. And for adults, it's, if we already have that cycle of shame going, then every new mistake or error or misstep kind of adds to it. It really becomes an internal squirrel in a cage, perfectionism and shame cycle, a squirrel in a cage internally. And having lived with that as a musician, I was so liberated. And believe me, it continues. I'm not free of it. It's so deeply ingrained to want to be enough. That's not the right word for me at this point. That's not the right word. But in a lot of people that I've worked with over the years, it's a quest for acceptance and belonging that nothing ever really fills it, because it's not. It comes from a place of being damaged. We have to heal that. The idea that we were never not enough to begin with, right? In order to break the cycle of perfectionism. But another way to break that cycle is to realize that making mistakes, trying hard, doing something, or not belonging is not a crime. We didn't hurt anyone. And so if all we did was make a mistake, we can learn to rethink that and see that in another light, which is, I tried something. I made an effort. I'm proud of that. We can learn a new internal dialogue. When I teach, now that I teach improv, I teach two different kinds of improv. The perfectionism thing is a very big deal in an improv class, because we all bring to it this psychological kind of self-protection. And part of that is making the grade, doing enough, being interesting. And perfectionism is part of that. Like just the fact that we're making some kind of a deal, like how will I know that I did all right? And it's our own internal story that we're telling ourselves. And then if something doesn't go well, because improv, there is no script, there's no props. We're just trying things. And we're trying to connect and communicate over a barrier of not having a specific kind of plan. But we do have a set of guidelines for how we're going to treat each other. That's really what makes improv work, is that we have a set of guidelines for how we're going to treat each other. And within that, we have a lot of creative freedom. So when people begin to overthink and say, kind of go over their quote mistakes or their things they think they didn't do well, the question we always ask ourselves, and we do it out loud, is, did I go out there and intentionally try to hurt someone, to embarrass someone? Did I go out there with a malicious intent of any kind? And if the answer is no, it almost always is. No one ever admits to having there. It's that I went out there with the intention of supporting my fellow players and supporting the other people in my scene and doing the best that I could. Now that becomes a pat on the back, and it comes from everybody else, and it can come from within ourselves too. We can break the cycle of shame through taking new actions and thinking new thoughts about those actions. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And it's making me think that, but improvisation is what? Is helping us get unstuck from the past thoughts, past behaviors, freeing us from that, right? Because in repeating, what is it about, like banging your head on the wall, right? Of course, it's always going to hurt, right? And why do that? Or leaning your ladder against the wrong wall, whatever those metaphors are. Um, but I'm also thinking of something else. What about the situation where a person, maybe we won't use the word perfect, right? But they're doing very well in what they're doing, right? And perhaps they're receiving positive feedback, maybe even awards or recognition, and I'll put this in quotation marks, they ought to be feeling good internally about themselves. But there's some sort of gaping hole inside of them, and they're continuing to search for some kind of validation. So it's not necessarily shame that they're feeling, but this relentless search for something external that's going to make them feel good or whole inside. Because I'm thinking that sometimes we wonder, again, we don't know people's internal lives, what's going on, but from a mental health point of view or suicide prevention, sometimes we hear about someone who, at least from an outsider's point of view, that their life seemed to be going very well, more than very well. And all of a sudden, they're dead by suicide.
It is shocking, and it's definitely worth discussing because I think, especially in the age of social media, I hate to be the one that constantly brings up the agonies of social media, which serves us in many ways to stay connected. I love it in a lot of ways, but we do also see a sort of a shiny version of other people that people are always comparing themselves to. So it is shocking when we see someone who has achieved something that everybody knows about, that is spectacular, or just very special, writers, artists in particular. And it's worth discussing this because I'm saying we are sort of aiming at success. And how do we know that some success that we're aiming for is going to be the healing that we're searching for? And it can definitely go a long way if we are approaching that success without in a healthy way. But there are lots of things about, say, success that can bring out an inner emptiness that I think most human beings struggle with on some level. But when well, first of all, external validation, we discover, won't actually take away an old wound that we've never addressed, right? So or it can revive old wounds because we thought that the pursuit of something big and amazing would make us feel amazing on the inside. And those two things can coexist. We can have success, and there can be people who are just doing wonderful things and have a balance in their private life that allows kind of the craziness of fame to keep them on a even keel. But the craziness of fame will just show us, the craziness is like no one really knows you when you're famous. People know of an image of you. People know a version of you that is polished and shiny, just like the social media presence that a lot of people create, that isn't actually a reflection of the daily struggle that it is to be human, that those people also struggle with the daily struggle to be happy in your own skin and to be humble and vulnerable and authentic. That's a whole other piece of work to do. I think about, there's an interview, Barbara Streisand is one of my absolute heroes because of her talent, but also the way she's carried herself through her entire life. She was on a 60 Minutes interview many years ago, might be 30 years ago, when she was at the top of her game. And Mike Wallace was the interviewer. And he was coming at her kind of hard. I don't understand why, but he was coming at her hard in a sort of a critical way, which I didn't understand why he was taking that tone with her. And she said something like, Mike, I've recorded, 40 albums. I've run an Oscar. I've won Tonys. In a way, like, when would it be enough for you to think that I'm enough? But it sort of took him back, because she was very like, I don't have to prove myself to you by doing another album or something like that. So she seemed on top of that, but she's had a lot of therapy, because she became famous very young, and she was aware that that world is not going to embrace her inner life at all, that it wanted her to be a certain kind of person when she was around other people, and she was shy and she was overwhelmed. So I followed that process, and I thought, okay, so that world doesn't support necessarily your inner self. It'll support your shiny self. And so does our commercial world in many ways. But she also got very teary when he brought up her mom. And she talked about her mom never gave her a compliment, even when she was a Oscar winner, a Tony winner, and had accomplished so many things. And that still hurt. She got upset, emotional. She got it went right in there. And she said, that will probably never leave me. And I read her biography, her autobiography, and I think of her because she's such an accomplished artist, but she's also done this inner work that I think is a good model for this idea that you're talking about, because she's a true perfectionist in her work. But in her private life, she's truly vulnerable and authentic in the fact that her mom lost her husband young and then remarried someone who didn't really like Barbara. And so they struggled all of their life. But her mother was also a singer who didn't perform, who didn't do anything with her talent. So I think she does a song called a duet with her mother on one of her albums, that she found a recording of her mother singing, and she did a duet with her mother. And her mother did have a beautiful voice. So her mother's, I guess, jealousy, her mother's understandable sort of resentments that she never had the opportunity.
Like the unlived life of the parent.
Exactly. And Barbara I thought that was a wonderful healing for people to listen to, that Barbara achieved all this, but the closeness with her mom, it never closed the distance with her mother. And that wound was with Barbara. But Barbara's healing came from understanding her mother's hurt, her mother's self-abandonment, that she never got that chance because of being a mom and being a widow and being poor. And Barbara just went out there and broke down barriers and did it herself. But that didn't mean that her mom didn't feel the sting, that she never had that opportunity. And it was a barrier between them. I don't think that's unique. I think that's something that we all live with. There are barriers where we don't understand why we were treated a certain way by people who are wounded themselves. And our healing can come from inner work, where we learn to tell their story in their own way and see how that impacted us. And I think that closing that distance between what we hope to have internally, what we hope to have emotionally, the intimacy we missed in our development, if that happened, or early losses or things that affected our inner life, that could help close the gap between fame or success, whatever that success looks like. It doesn't have to be fame. It could just be success, and realizing, oh, wow, that is not actually healing the inner me. Now, that being said, I do think there's a wonderful way in which finding your voice, whether it's through a creative act, although I think the creative act is a way to find your voice, whatever that might be. That could be being a really good accountant. It doesn't matter. It's finding your capacity to bring something into the world that's truly you, whether that's yourself or some piece of work, can be a way of healing yourself internally that closes that gap, because you know that you achieved this and you did this and you overcame some of those old defenses in order to do it. And yet the success itself is a byproduct of that. It isn't the thing, because if we're seeking that thing, I think that can be very hard for people to discover. It doesn't fix me.
I'm thinking potentially the adult who has experiences growing up, and we all do, that can be painful, that as that adult might be unconsciously saying or feeling, look at me, look at me, look at me, right? They're being looked at, let's say in a positive way now, but if you shifted into the past, they weren't being looked at or supported, seen, felt, loved in that sense. And as you said, that we can re-understand the past, right? Or reinterpret it or reimagine it. However, what was also done was done, right? So the look at me now, people are looking at us, and hopefully that, because it's so important with attachment, the gaze, how literally how you're being looked at, the look in the eye, the emotional expression in the caregiver's face, right? Is we're becoming attuned to that, right? And if there's a lack of attunement, right, that can generate that quote attachment wound or that hole in the heart. And although as an adult, we may on some unconscious level be seeking that look of approval. And even when we receive it, there's that echo from the past, right? Which I think you're right. Without that work that's being done for ourselves, or that appreciation or honoring or loving that inner child, and also that, and this takes work to, I like what you said about stories, to imagine the story of the parent, right? What was going on with them? Because sometimes I think, and I'll speak personally, and maybe this is true for everybody, we become stuck in our own rigid story, right? My story as I imagine it. And there may not be flexibility in understanding that story. And I'm not, I have blinders on to the stories of others. Maybe that's where improv comes. If I can take on the role, in that improv and speaking through another voice and having a dialogue, right? Maybe that's like Gestalt therapy with the switching chairs.
Absolutely. Gestalt therapy, psychodrama does this kind of work. And there's a way to use improv skills, exactly as you said, to try on different perspectives and different points of view. And there's some wonderful research about how perspective taking and perspective shifting engages our creative mind in a way that can have lasting, enduring effects on the way we remember our own story or the way we understand what happened. So I think improv is a great way to just put it into action. All those, and Gestalt also. Improv is a way to sort of create forward. Gestalt is about understanding backward, and psychodrama also, which is both are very important. About understanding what's already happened, and improv is creating in the moment, building on what's already happened, and finding possibilities that learning to think in an unusual way is a powerful thing. But I want to share also, there's the storytelling skill that I think is very powerful for post-traumatic growth, but also self-understanding. And out of self-understanding, if we really unpack what's really happened to us in our life, we will begin to understand the other characters in our life in a more coherent way that puts maybe a new spin on the narrative. And I'll just give you a quick example of something that over the holidays, I really got in touch with. 10 years ago, I recorded a story for a podcast called Risk, which is a storytelling podcast. It's a pretty successful podcast. And I told a story about a Christmas Eve, that I got stuck in a blizzard with my sister, who's 2 years younger than I, and we were raised almost like twins in a way, because I come from a family of 8, and the two of us girls being close in age, we were just in the same bed, wore the same clothes, had the same haircut. We were just the same. We were a pair. And we were in college together at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. And I was about to, after graduation, go to Australia to be with this Australian man that I had met and that I thought was my future. That was my destiny. And no one in my life wanted me to do this at all. Everyone was very much against it. And my sister and I are in the car on Christmas Eve because I was poor and I worked every possible minute on Christmas Eve until the last second. We drive 2 hours north to go to the farm to be with my family, and we get stuck in a blizzard. We can't even see where the road is. We're going 2 miles an hour with the windshield wipers slapping back and forth. And my sister starts a fight with me about why am I going to Australia after I leave college? Instead, why didn't I go to Europe with her the summer before? And why am I leaving everybody? And I'm driving, basically trying to save our lives, not even knowing where the road is, terrified in a lot of ways. And she's starting a fight with me that she's been having within herself for a year since I made this plan to go to Australia. And a lot of my fears was not just about our lives that night and making it home finally, because it's the country where we were going. It took us 6 hours to go, 2 hours. We were just going so slowly, but also that I wanted her support when I told my mother that I was going to go to Australia and then I was going to come out to the East Coast. If that didn't work out, I was coming out to the East Coast for an internship, that I was really leaving the Midwest. And I wanted my sister to support it. And in that drive, realized she does not support this. She's not going to support it when I tell my mother. I'm on my own. This is going to be the worst Christmas ever. And we basically destroyed a box of Brock's candies. I don't know in Canada if you have these candies. Like we were just reached this point of tension where we couldn't talk anymore. We just started eating candy. Just the old family eating disorder just took over. Anyway, I told that story when we got home. She ended up really getting in my corner and helping me settle this with my mother, and my parents both. And I did actually go to Australia, and I did move to the East Coast because that didn't work out with him. And I was listening to that story. They re-aired it this Christmas. I recorded it over 10 years ago. And I now think about that story in an entirely different way than when I told it so many years ago. I told it with a little bit of comedy, but also I saw myself as this sort of the aggrieved person in the story that I told a number of years ago. Why doesn't anybody want me to have adventures? Why doesn't anybody see my side of this? I really felt alone. And I need to finally do something for myself. Today, after lots of years of work, and my mother died in the meantime, and lots of things happened, and I did a lot of self-examination, and I reheard that story. And now if I tell that story again, I would say, of course they were upset that I was leaving. Of course my sister was upset that we were breaking up the team. I'm going in a direction she isn't going to go. And I was just chomping at the bit. I wanted that. I wanted us to be separate. She did not want that. Well, it's totally fair that she didn't want that. She doesn't have to want what I want. But I felt like the aggrieved person. If I told that story today, I would say, of course they were scared for me. They were scared of losing me. They were scared of the change that I was forcing on them. And I now see that as it's a complicated thing when you change the family dynamic. And I didn't see it at the time, and I didn't even see it when I told the story 10 years ago. So I think of storytelling, when I told that story, I was unpacking it with the consciousness that I had that number of years ago. And now I have expanded in a certain way, and I am much more forgiving, I think, about certain family dynamics. And I think that's growth. And if my sister and I ever talk about it again, I'm no longer upset that she started a fight with me in the middle of a blizzard.
There was more than one blizzard going on that day.
Oh my gosh, you're right. There was a storm inside the car. And what was shocking to me was that it was so hard for her to say this to me that she waited until we were trapped in the car to say it. And I mean, we hung out all the time, and she just she just couldn't tell me how upset she was that I was leaving. And I understand why. I would have not been happy to hear this. I wanted their support because change is very complicated. And I didn't see the layers of that. And I didn't see my role in their unhappiness. So I'm affirming what you're saying, that the stories they can be rigid. I could have stuck with the idea that I was the aggrieved person, that no one would rally and root for me. I made it. I did this impossible thing. I went to Australia, and then I had this love affair that didn't work out. I wanted everybody to be on my side with that, and they were okay with it, but they were more like, good, she's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we can change our perspective if we're open to it. And it opens up so much more truth when we're willing to see the story from other characters' points of view. So my mom wasn't telling me at the time that my dad was actually very ill. I didn't realize how sick he was. They weren't telling us. So a lot of people weren't telling each other things in my family at the time. There was a lot of other drama, but not that was out there. So part of her fear about me leaving was that my dad would die while I was away, and that she wouldn't have my help during this time. And she wasn't able to actually come out and say it. So I learned a lot of things since then about how we communicate in my family. And I don't think it's unique. I work with clients all the time where there are little pockets of misinformation. There are pockets of secrets. There are things that people just feel guilty or terrified to tell you that then become part of the identity you have, the part of the role that you're taking. And so my sense of being the aggrieved, sort of codependent, I have to show up for everybody and nobody shows up for me, has been very much altered. Yes, I had a role that was my childhood role, and then I expanded it out into being the adventurer that no one would root for. And now that I see it as everyone was suffering in some way, and we were also trying our best to stay connected, and that was a huge threat to them that I was taking off, which I didn't see it that way, but I now see it from their point of view. So there are lots of ways improv scenes and improv skills can be a practice in taking the perspective of every player in a scene. And I've done an exercise where we take The Wizard of Oz, if everyone in the room knows that story. Generally speaking, people have seen the movie. And we tell the story from each point of view, including the wizard. Now we have Wicked, so we kind of see, this is before Wicked, but that every one of those characters has a point of view, and if they were the main character, what would that story be? And everybody in our lives is the main character in their own story. You know, we're a player, we're an auxiliary to them, and I think that it's a wonderful creative expansion to, even if we can't get their point of view, to imagine it. What might it be? To put ourselves distance ourselves from our own behavior and say, oh, how am I impacting them? It's great liberation because maybe we're not perfect. Okay, great. That's what we're talking about here today. Maybe everything we did was viewed as selfish. That was so shocking to me that anybody would think that I was being selfish. But I could see why they thought that. I don't think I was being selfish, but I can see why they thought that. I can see why people felt that, because it was hurtful to them. And yet it was okay for me to leave. And those nuances and those dynamics within groups can play a role in, they can really tug at perfectionism, the image we want to project, or like you said, the rigid roles, or that the identity. Let's, instead of the word rigid though, let's use the word sticking. It sticks because it's always been there until we change it. If we change it, it changes.
I wish I could remember the title of this poem. And I'm going to be thinking about this all day, and we'll share it with you when I remember. But there is a poem, a famous poem about, I'll make up the number in the title, like 7 different ways to look at a blackbird, right? Or 13 different ways to look at a blackbird. And they're short phrases per stanza. And I'm thinking that would be potentially a wonderful pairing with improv, looking at that poem, reading that poem, discussing the different perspectives of that poem. And then the storytelling of taking on those different perspectives too.
That's exactly it. And I've got to find this poem now. That would be a wonderful template.
Yeah, yes. Mm-hmm. And when you were talking about, quote, the craziness of fame, let alone all of life, that I was thinking of Cary Grant, right? And was his birth name, was it David Leach, or am I misremembering? Archie, right? Archie Leach?
You know what?
Like but it wasn't Cary Grant.
No,
right?
no.
And someone was complimenting about how wonderful he is, i.e. Cary Grant, you're wonderful. And his comment was something about that he felt that way about Cary Grant too, but that wasn't who he was. Like, I'd like to know that Cary Grant too.
I love that, because that he fully embraced that this was an identity and a something that he took on, and it wasn't his true self. His true self may have been channeled through that, his sense of humor, his agility, all the different ways that he absorbed other characters, because he was very responsive to everybody around him.
Mm-hmm.
But he fully embraced that this is not, you don't know me. I only know this character. I think Marilyn Monroe talked about that also, that she could walk down the street and not be noticed, or she could put on, she could let that Marilyn Monroe-ness out.
Yeah, that she created Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yet, I've read a lot about her and watched many films about her, right? In terms of being, her mother was mentally ill, right? The father wasn't part of the family. In fact, I think Marilyn didn't know who her father was. Or when she reached out to the person that she thought was her father, he never responded to her, and then was in an orphanage and was sexually abused. And wow, her life story.
Right. But, and all those things
and suicide attempts, psychiatric hospitalizations, right?
Yes. And at the time, she had probably the best, well, I don't know if it was the best, but she had psychiatric care at the time, which probably doesn't mean a lot because they put her on a lot of medications. Well, Judy Garland, same. I mean, Judy Garland had just tremendous talent and tremendous struggles because of not like you mentioned, not healthy attachment, the burdens of fame at a way too young an age. And I think I forgot Marilyn Monroe's actual name, Jean.
Norma Jean.
Norma Jean. Yes, Norma Jean. She did find a channel for that. Obviously, she had this tremendous creative energy, and she created this character and knew how to make it work for her. But she was also a very talented actress, channeling that character that never really got it. I don't think she got a real chance to be the actress she might have been if she hadn't. Yeah.
And such a intelligent woman.
Absolutely. And so, in a very sexist time. She was such a brilliant woman in a very sexist time. So what it really was a winning hand for her, but not mentally, but her struggles were so epic. And it's a perfect example though, when you say the thing about the not necessarily, I mean, for the rest of us, it might be perfection or just to achieve something. Like maybe she wanted to achieve fame and she did it, and then it didn't fix her. And that is often people will push themselves to achieve something, to overcome grief, and find that it doesn't heal the grief, but I still think it's worthy. It's a worthy effort if you can have that balance of saying, but I do have something in me that can survive it and can keep going through it and can contribute something to the world, even when I feel so broken. There's something to that, to using your gifts, your creative strengths, and so on. At the same time, knowing that internally we could feel very broken, very hurt, very wounded, and we're going to have to continue to do that work of self-compassion, self-compassion is one thing, but also recognizing we are our own patient in a way. Like we have to be there for ourselves and not keep putting all that effort externally for external validation or even external connection. We need to be internally connected as well.
What are your thoughts from a spiritual perspective? The self with a small s and the self with a larger self, with a larger self, a spiritual self. Even the creative spirit, right? The life force, right? Is what creativity itself. And yet we can each channel that creativity in our own unique way. But I'd circle back and say, even in moments of deep despair, is there a wholeness and an enoughness that's already there from the beginning that may not be what I perceive as my small self, small letter S, but is my larger S, myself.
And maybe there's another word we could use, maybe source, another S
Yeah, I
word.
like that. Yeah, source. Yeah, my creative. I'm flowing through me is a creative source that has purity in it. It is purity.
I am really comforted by that myself. And I also I think the practice of thinking that way, of saying, even when especially in those times when we just can't feel it, like we just can't feel it because of our whatever is there, that we have to fight through and battle through, um, that
That pain that can be felt as unbearable pain.
right, the pain that is unbearable, the sense of futility that we could feel, that as hard as I've tried, I'm still spinning my wheels in this way, in whatever way that may be. That the idea, and I do think that creativity is a way to find this, is to say, but something new is happening somewhere. And I could look at a piece of writing by Bach, a piece of music that Bach wrote in 16. Wait, you should know my music history. Many centuries ago. I don't want to. I don't want to.
A
My
long
music.
time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. Or a beautiful piece of music by Beethoven, or even before that. And say that same source that inspired those people that are long gone is somehow eternal. It's somehow present. I don't have to understand it. And I also know that they didn't understand it. They just channeled it. And I could find or a great piece of a painting and go to a museum. I think that's where the arts can be a source of source, a source of tapping into the something that is greater than us, that is not only so much greater than us, it's greater than all of us together, and that we can, each of us, if we want to, tap into it and express some individuated form of it, and find our authenticity, and maybe find our hope that we can change, that we can find light in the darkness. And I think, I mean, having worked in addictions so many years, and people talk about the higher power, and some people have a very hard time tapping into that. But the idea that source exists and you don't have to understand it, you can flick a switch like turning on a light in your room, which I don't really understand electricity. Honestly, I don't understand. I'm not particularly scientific. I just know that if I am open to flicking the switch, or I pay my bill, which I consider, prayer, meditation, all these practices are paying the bill to your electric company, that the power will be there when we need it.
Your light up and lightened
That's
company.
right.
Yeah.
That there's lots of practices that we do when we're feeling so low and so in the dark and so out of out of range of that good, out of light and love, and feeling, if we're just feeling on the edge of the abyss, the practices, those muscles, working those muscles when we really can't feel it, are going to pay off. That's the thing I have learned from my deepest depressions, and the times where I really just was so struggling so much. Continuing to do the practices, just like taking a walk, benefits your heart for the future. It's a gift you're giving yourself for the times that it will be there for you, and you'll have the muscles available to actually express it when you're feeling a little better, or maybe it will just come to you when you least expect it, or you'll have a dream, or something will come in a journal entry. But those practices keep us on um this, what's the word, I want to say, on the path to connection to the big S. The source is where our larger self feels that connection, and our larger self we have access to that through these tools of, and I think just not to tout improv constantly, but the reason that I love improv now that I've discovered it and come through so much of my own perfectionism, the freezing in the face of the unknown for me, I've developed an ability to create in the face of the unknown through long-term continuous training in improv, because improv is the most like real life, I think, in terms of in these terms, like you're facing other human beings in a space where you only have each other. You don't have a set, you don't have a script, you don't really have a plan. You have this agreement of how you're going to treat each other, which
Could
is
you say more about that? You had mentioned that earlier on. What is the agreement? How are we treating each
right.
other?
So in improv, there are skills, and one of them is the receptivity to others' ideas. We agree to radically support each other. That we agree to a way of playing. So it's kind of like any sport. When you think about basketball, football, baseball, every sport has a set of rules. We know what hitting is. We know what pitching is in baseball. We know what the outfield is. We know what those roles are within that scheme, within that template. And then we bring to it all of our muscle and all of our skill to do the very best we can within those rules. And we don't know what's going to actually happen in the game. We just know we're going to play the game. So improv training is this very gradual process of getting on board with the idea, like I'm going to say yes to your idea and you're going to say yes to mine. And we're going to create together by saying yes. You could do a game where could we do an exercise real quick, just you and me, and we'll just demonstrate
Sure.
this, because
Yeah.
this is something new to you. So there's an exercise, which I'll break down the rules of that in a minute. I mean, the reason for it, but there's a one word at a time proverbs. So how this works is one word at a time, you and I will create a proverb. So all you have to do is say the next word that flows from the word that I say, whether it's the, or a flowery word. And the are just as equal to words as big words. And we won't be able to know what this is going to turn out to be until it's over. So it starts with just one word at a time until it feels like it's a complete thought. And then we go, yes, 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 like we're Tibetan monks in a cave. And then we start a new proverb. So I just want us to do 2 proverbs, and then we'll talk about the rules of improv. Is that
I
fair?
have a question. Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
How do we know when the proverb has been created?
We'll feel it. We'll see. It'll feel like a complete thought.
Okay.
So I'll start, and you just say the next word that comes to you, and then I'll say the next word, let's just do an experiment. Okay. So every
Person
who
cries,
is
feeling,
something
too, TOO.
much. Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, 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 yes.
That's a complete thought, right? So now you say a word and I'll follow.
When
we
gather
together
I said in, when we
I'm
gather
sorry, I didn't hear
together
that.
in, yeah.
Community.
Something
happens.
Oh, I like that.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, 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 yes.
So, see, and what? It's a delightful experience to just be surprised by what we can create simply by adding to each other's ideas. I truly didn't hear the word in. It was a beautiful offer. So every word that we give each other in improv is called an offer. So in a one word at a time exercise, every word is an offer.
And an offering, a gift.
Right. And we say yes to it by acknowledging it, simply by adding, and then we played by an agreement. Sometimes we might do 3 words at a time, and sometimes we might do a scene where it's 1 sentence at a time. So the idea is to we make a rule like that, and then we play by that rule. And when people play by those rules, we free up a part of our brain that would normally, or in other situations, would be worried about something, not be worried about, what's going to happen now. All we need to, it really confines us to this one thing. I'm focused on you, and I'm focused on supporting you by offering something in response. And as long as we both play with that kind of goodwill, something will surprise us and often will delight us. And that sense of delight is something that we then build on to do a little bit more complex exercises. So that is a very low-key example of what improv really is, and builds out into people doing scenes where they're characters and so on and so forth. But it's the same concept. We agree what the rules of the game are. We support each other radically. In other words, we say yes to it. If somebody really is going off in some direction that we don't understand, we still support that, and therefore it will not seem like a mistake. It will seem like it's okay. We might talk about it later and say, wow, I thought we were doing this form, and we'll talk about it. Sometimes people forget, have a brain freeze, but it's the radical support of each other that allows us to create something unusual together, or something none of us could have anticipated. And out of that, I realized like how much of perfectionism and anxiety is about trying to predict what will happen, trying to predict the outcome of what we're doing, and trying to predict the reaction to what we're doing. And creative acts simply just are just hamstrung by those three things: predicting, over preparing, over analyzing, and then trying to figure out what the reaction will be. Improv forces us, if we choose to do it, to just focus on this thing, and then adding, and this thing, and then adding. And it's like we're both driving a car. And you just have to concentrate, hopefully not in a blizzard. But
I was just thinking that in the car or outside the car. Yeah. Yeah. What if someone said to you, Jude, sounds wonderful, but I'm too anxious?
Right. I would say, let's try. And I would say we will keep these exercises. In fact, there are therapists that do improv for anxious people. But I would say most of the people that come to my classes are very anxious people. And improv is a way of, I would say, let's try it, and let's see if this shifts your anxiety in any way. So the focus on the other person, the focus on the rules of the game, that we just stick to the rules of the game, keeping it simple and calibrated to someone's level of comfort. But just, we want a little bit of discomfort, because that heightens awareness and heightens attention. There has to be a little bit of discomfort, like just simply that I don't know what's going to happen next, like the Proverbs game. We just simply don't know what's going to happen. That raises our interest, and our sense of our attention is heightened in a way that makes learning stick. So if we have success at a simple exercise, and then we do an exercise, say, an alphabet story, where we start with a letter of the alphabet, and the next sentence has to be with the next letter of the alphabet, and the next sentence has to be with, and we just have to search our brains for a way to make that work. And it's so much fun that anxiety just kind of is like a secondary thing. It's like, oh yeah, I was anxious, but I was also laughing. Or I was anxious, but I was so interested in what was going to happen, or what you were saying, or what came out of me, that I realized I could override the anxiety. And so then I'll teach people about, there's two parallel tracks in our brain: anxiety and curiosity. Anxiety is sort of an automatic, I don't know what's going to happen next, so
it's like a foot on the brake, the anxiety.
Exactly. Curiosity is the same trail, but we have a foot on the gas. And it's and when improv allows us to possibly put our foot on the gas and say, oh, what is the next thing? What's this fun thing that's emerging? And the emphasis is really on fun, but the emphasis is on fun because fun emerges. We're not forcing it. It's a flow. And it comes because life is interesting. Moments unfold that when something is unexpected, our brains are actually wired to get excited about that. But anxiety makes us think that the unknown and the unexpected is a threat. It doesn't mean it's bad, but it just means it's a threat. So we go into this heightened state of fight, flight, or freeze, right? Or it could be a mild form of fight, flight, or freeze. Those psychological self-protective defenses are almost automatic in any kind of group when people come together. So I'll face people who have never done improv before, and I know I'm very familiar with that state of mind. I've lived in that state of mind myself. I understand that they're in that. So I design exercises to make the fun override, and like simple exercises that are about connecting, fun, but also just a little element of the unknown, so that within 15 minutes, well, I'll give you a quick example. I was doing a training for social workers at a conference, and they came out of interest. It was a pretty big group. I want to say about 50 people who didn't know each other necessarily. It was all conference goers from all over the state of New York. And so I didn't want to cue them up too much. I didn't want to like run a narrative about what we're going to do. I said, let's just do this one thing and then we'll talk about it. What I'd like you to do is go up to somebody that you don't know and greet them as if they're an old friend that you haven't seen in 25 years. And you're so happy to see them. And so everybody just seemed fine to do that. The room erupts with, oh my gosh, you look amazing, back and forth. And then we paused. So then I said, okay, now I'd like you to go up and greet someone as if they're a famous author whose work has just changed your life. So now you see people just being like, oh my gosh, and they're doing that with each other. No, your work has affected me, and so on. Then we come together and I say, so how does the room feel now compared to when you came into something that you knew was going to be about improv? And everybody said the room feels expanded. It feels fun. It feels alive. It feels dynamic. And I say, you are all improvisers. You just improvised. You acted as if a thing were true. That isn't true. You don't know each other. You don't have a 25-year relationship, or you're not a famous author. But what if you were? How would that feel? So we try on these little, costumes. We play them out, and then we go back, and I think of it this way. It's like when you inflate a balloon that has a shape, like it's a shape of a puppy or something. It goes back when you let the air out or the helium. It goes back to the flabbiness, right? But it's still a little bit bigger, because you once expanded it out all the way to its full potential. So we do these exercises where we kind of stretch ourselves to do something that's using our creative potential in a very kind of out there way. And then we go back and sit down and go, oh, I am a little bit more expanded. Just knowing that that's possible makes people a little bit more willing to try even, more risks. And the more risk, the more reward. And then after a while, this becomes a new way of thinking. That I can do things, that I can act as if I have to. But more importantly, it taps into spontaneity. And all we really need is spontaneity, a little bit more sense of that, the energy of creativity that's in us. And we just have to tap into it. And all those defenses that say, I'm afraid, they're habits. They're habits of mind. And we kind of gradually expand beyond them and then go back and go, okay, how do I feel now? And that self-reflection then becomes like, okay, I'm looking at my anxiety. So what's the part of me that's looking at my anxiety? That's a bigger part of me. That's the bigger self is looking at my anxiety and going, I'm here for you. We can do something else. It's like that. And I think that as an artist, you probably recognize that as a musician and as an artist, that your artist self struggles against your anxious self, I'm sure at times, and but provides an outlet for it. Does that feel true?
Yeah, yes. Also going back to the hopelessness, right, of suicidal despair. I think a person could be thinking, nothing is ever going to work out for me.
Right.
Or there is no future of change. Whatever is horrible is going to continue to be horrible, or it could even be there is no meaning to anything. Not as a liberating meaninglessness, but as a deadly one of what's the point. It seems that improvisation can looks at those thoughts in a different way that can help to free us. Could you say something about that? That thought about in that moment of, I want to kill myself, this pain is unbearable, there must be the thought that there's nothing possible that's going to change this, that I've already written the future, or I've actually written it off. There is no future. But improvisation is saying something else.
Well, thank you for making that connection, because in those times when it feels like everything is futile, right? Everything is meaningless, and why try? It's only and there's only pain ahead, right?
Yes.
There's
Uh-huh.
if I and it's understandable that if I'm going to feel like this forever, then I don't want to do it. I just don't. There's nothing for me. There's no reason to try, because if I'm going to feel like this anyway. And that is a state of mind that is so devastating, and understandable that people struggle through this. And I would say that the philosophy of improv, and then the practice of putting it into action, is really saying, let's just try to create something out of that emptiness with someone else. You don't improvise alone. You can, I mean, you can learn some skills and practice, but it is done with other people who are also not sure what's going to happen next. So it's about taking away the idea, what is the future, what is going to happen. We're not focusing on that. We're focusing on, right in this moment, what am I creating with you? And that focus in and of itself can shift the brain, can just shift our focus, it can actually, and it changes creates new neural pathways if there's enough fulfillment in it, enough reward, and enough intensity, enough positive emotional intensity. It rapidly grows new neural pathways that can help us shift out of that state of mind over time. There's good research on that they did here at the University of, in the University of Michigan and other places, but also here at Stony Brook, where I'm close to. It is improv isn't saying the future is coming or not coming, or doesn't mean, it's that we're creating something right now. And if I can shift my focus right now to you and what we create together, then it becomes more real, that I'm always connected. And I think a lot of times what people struggle with, certainly clients of mine over the years that were contemplating suicide, one of the things that helped our work was who would be impacted if they gave into that impulse, and the futility and the emptiness and the meaninglessness overcame them, and they did it, right? That I would have them write about, take the perspective of everyone they could think of that would be impacted. And just knowing that people would be hurt by this gives you that creative act. That's using improv in real time to take a different perspective and to see ourselves as having worth simply by being important to that other person. Sometimes people would say, I don't believe anybody would care. Or they'd say, I want those people to hurt. Those are the tough ones. Like, they're the ones, these people that will hurt, I want that. I want them to feel it. So we'd have to work that out. Like sometimes it matters, and sometimes, but that, so I'm saying that isn't always going to be the antidote, is to say there are people that are so angry and hurt and aggrieved. But the improv idea is about not futurizing, just saying, in this moment right now, I'm capable of creating, and I'm curious about what's going to happen next. Or my curiosity is activated whether I like it or not. It's just the way our brains are. When I worked inpatient, and that was very many years ago, but when I worked inpatient with very depressed people, like people were inpatient because of a suicide attempt that didn't succeed, or they were just not functioning and were on the brink, right? Creating songs and creating scenes and creating something together, and the way it changes our brain was very difficult for people. But getting out the idea, sometimes those scenes and those songs were about how miserable they were. And I still find that's true in my work today. A lot of great art comes out of expressing the misery. So knowing
Yes.
that, so sometimes even if people say, yeah, I the thing about the people that would be hurt, in fact, saying, oh, I want them to be hurt. So then the alternative to that is, let's use improv, songwriting, scene creating to talk about and share how miserable feels. And even if that's a song of anger, a song of rage, a song of resentment, or a scene of a character that is filled with rage and resentment, great. That's great. It's expressing something that's real for you. Now, I know as a therapist that can actually, getting it out there and having it seen and heard, that can actually help shift some of that despair. Because self-expression, the antidote to despair isn't hope, it's creativity. I didn't make that up, and I can't quote it. It's a musician who I love, and I'm blanking on who it is. But he said the opposite of despair isn't hope, it's creativity.
I'm thinking that the despair might be the hopelessness, right? That anything can ever change for the better. Or maybe it would even be something new, right? Despair is there will never be anything new. And in parenthesis, that could be on the more positive side. And then comes that creativity.
Yeah, and the agency that comes with creativity, if we can engage somebody in it, and that's the skill of a creative arts therapist, or a therapist that uses the arts, engaging that part of a person, if that maybe they've never had that opportunity, but that is it's not telling somebody you should feel better. It's not telling anybody how to feel at all. It's saying we're going to take that feeling and we're going to maximize it, and maybe it impacts other people. And if you have impact on the world, that's a sense of agency that we're just trying to hit it from every angle, right? Like that a sense of agency can then translate into a sense that maybe I don't think the world around me is going to get any better, but maybe I can contribute something.
There's a poem by Marge Piercy called To Be of Use, right? And maybe that's the idea too of what you're talking about, that these emotions can also be useful, right?
Absolutely. You know the song Landslide by Fleetwood Mac? I've been
I
afraid.
probably do, but I'm not remembering it right now. Tell me about it.
Well, the lyrics of the chorus are, I've been afraid of changing because I built my world around you. The
Oh,
song.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I know that song.
right. That song would trigger so much conversation. We would sing when I would do music therapy in groups, especially in hospitals. We would sing that song, and just the word landslide it looks like it's just going down. Like it's just we're just going down, and it's so affirming that like that is a real human experience to feel like I'm going down and only down, and it's just an abyss. And why bother? I'm just gonna let it happen, right? Or I'm just gonna make it happen. But she says, I've been afraid of changing because I built my world around you. And time makes us older, makes us, anyway, even children get older. I'm getting older too. So it's accepting that change happens and accepting that there are certain inevitabilities. But I built my world around something. It's not maybe a person. Maybe I built my world around a dream, an idea, and something I envisioned for myself, and it may or may not have happened, or an idea about how the world really is that the world has shown it is not. But the idea that I built my world around something and now it's gone means I can build my world. I mean, that's the flip of it. The other is that if you built your world about something, now you can build my world around something else. Maybe I can build my world around wisdom, that I know some things because of my suffering, or I can share some things because of my suffering. I'm wiser now. Lots of things, but that if I built my world once, I can build my world again.
Isn't there a phrase, I'm not quite sure who said this, about castles in the air, but something about it's okay to do that, but then you build the the pillars to support that.
It was Thoreau that said that.
Hey, Thoreau's in the house.
I grew up on that because you know who quoted that? Louisa May Alcott in Little Women. She used to
Oh,
say, "Build your castles in the air, but then build foundations under them." And sidebar to you saying this, I feel deeply connected to you right now. I grew up reading Little Women and Thoreau and Emerson. And then I live on the East Coast. I drove up to the town that she lived in, Louisa May Alcott, went to her house, and Thoreau lived right down the road, and so did Emerson. They lived right down the road, and we
oh
went to
my
their
goodness.
homes. And so these are I just feel very connected that you said that. I love those writers so very much. And I always thought that, yes, build castles in the air, then build foundations under them.
So, Jude, for those who are listening who might be more interested in the classes that you offer or learning more about improv in general, what would you recommend?
Well, I could recommend, I'll start with my own stuff, but there's lots of improv classes where you live, and in-person improv is wonderful and amazing. My website is lifestage.me. I write about it on Substack. So if you put my name in a Substack, you can follow me there. And I write one article a week at least about ways to apply improv principles and philosophy to your real life. And then look up improv classes local to you, but also there are online classes. And those, during the pandemic, I discovered that improv online is very not only doable, I continue to do it. I have a regular Monday night class that people take from all over the country. In fact, if the time works out, all over the world. And yet just look locally for a joy of improv class, like a regular, you don't have to have a therapist teach you how to use improv for your own growth. If it's a well-taught class, the experience of improv will begin to create new neural pathways that grow a new habit of joy and hope. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's possible. But it does take practice. Like if you can go and have a really fun experience and continue and grow. And if you want to do a class with me, I do them online as well. So you can find that on my website or listen to my podcast. We do a game in every, just like Diana and I just did a game. I do a game or two or an exercise in every episode of my podcast that you could probably do with your family and friends or with your kid. It's fun.
Well, I'm so happy to have met you and for you to be with us today. And I was thinking how auspicious for us to be meeting on the cusp of a new year, right? Because a new day, a new year. It sounds like that's what improv is all about.
Well, that is a wonderful insight. Thank you. It is. It's about navigating the new and unfamiliar. And here we are about to have a new year, hopefully a new spiritual and psychological start for people. It does feel like that. And I appreciate your catching that.
So thank you again, Jude. And I know we're going to meet again. Bye.
Wonderful. Bye.